So, over the last several years, many years, how has your work leveraged your audience participation to create positive cultural impact? For instance, your past collaborations between May and, for instance, Habitat for Humanity,
Mm-hmm.
or even on a larger scale with Global Citizen, and how the concept of Global Citizen works to leverage that audience participation to essentially change the world.
Well, I think when you think about art's ability to communicate or to bring people together, it really is that sense of connection for me, whether it's across the senses in a single body or it's across a room full of people sharing that similar melody or lyric, um, that holds the magic, right? And so I always try to look to things in nature uh, to kind of point the way, or there's a science called biomimicry where you're as an engineer or designer, you might study the way that a natural system has evolved to address a problem. Um, One of the things that's really inspired me a lot is the science of emergence. And emergence looks at patterns of self-organizing systems in nature. And like, for example, a flock of birds or a school of fish or a colony of ants, or the way that humans become, a community in a city context. Like, in each one of those contexts, you have the individual ant, right? And then you have the colony of ants. At a colony level, the colony is smarter than any of the ants that make it up. But there's no single ant directing things. There's a queen ant, but she's not like directing traffic or like sending out blueprints that everybody's following. So how does that order happen? Like, how do relatively dumb individual things make up this incredibly complicated, sophisticated meta level thing? That meta level thing is actually called a superorganism. So a superorganism is made up of all of these lesser organisms, but somehow in their connection they form something that is smarter than any of the things that make it up. And so for me, when I see that playing out in nature as a pattern, that's like a light bulb moment coming on and saying, okay, well, in our connection, we're actually able to do things that none of us could really do on our own. And that doesn't diminish our role as individuals. It really actually empowers you to be the best individual you can be, but in the context of a larger inevitable collective that we are a part of, which is just humanity. It's life. It's our particular expression of life connected to all of the other systems that make our lives possible. And so because artistry is such a natural way of connecting people, for me, I want to kind of be dedicated over the course of my lifetime to seeing how that connection can allow people to be inspired to work on things together. And so, over the course of our career in May, we tried a lot of different things to look at our fan base not as a market to consume artistry that we were creating, but actually to look at the artistry that we were creating as something that we could also be creating together, and that might be a gateway through which to enter some kind of larger collaboration. And so we tried this really ambitious at the time experiment in 2008 and 9, where instead of putting out a traditional record, we basically invited our audience to be a part of a story with us over the course of an entire year. So every month a new chapter would come out of the story, a new song, kind of a new collection of artistry and writing and photos. And people would basically make donations to receive that artistry. And in doing so, those donations would go towards the creation of different humanitarian projects. And so over the course of that year, we built a home with Habitat for Humanity, and by we I mean the band and our community of fans. Like, it was an attempt to embody the idea that we could do more together than we could as individuals. And we certainly proved that to ourselves and to anybody who was a part of that with us. We can kind of look back and see that all of the good that came from that year came from a connection. That connection started with art, but it extended into the connection that people felt with each other, and how that became solutions to different practical problems that people had to overcome.
Yeah. And so kind of taking that on a larger scale, tell us a little bit about your involvement with Global Citizen and how that kind of embodies the same conversation or same kind of structure.
Yeah, so after the band went into hiatus, one of the first big projects I wanted to explore was how to take this idea of building a fan base as a community and helping, collaborate on different, challenges that our communities faced up to a larger scale. And I found a community of people in New York who were all converging there, wanting to think about things at that same level of scale. And so we decided to create a music festival that you couldn't buy a ticket to. You actually had to earn one with your actions. And so the idea is that, we would take an enormous thing like global poverty and kind of break it down into all the constituent parts that kind of contribute to it. So things like education and access to clean water or food or medicine, sustainable employment and all these things are connected to each other, right? So it's like if you're in poverty, you can't expect a school to come in and solve everything if no one has clean water or food. So it's just kind of like, okay, there's a baseline to what it takes for human flourishing to happen. And so how could we take something that massive and break it down to a way that people could participate and understand and go on a journey? And so we ended up having an incredibly ambitious goal of doing a massive concert on the Great Lawn of Central Park, and creating a mechanism so that people would have to earn their way in by taking these different actions around this larger ecosystem of issues, contributing to helping alleviate extreme global poverty. And we had Neil Young and Crazy Horse and the Foo Fighters and the Black Keys and Kanon and Band of Horses, all that first year kind of raised their hands to be a part of the inaugural festival. We had 60,000 people come out. We leveraged $1.2 billion in new commitments from different governments and companies and foundations to be unlocked. And it really was kind of the birth of now a very thriving movement. So we just had our 6th annual festival and leveraged over $30 billion now in new commitments. So just seeing kind of the way that idea has taken hold is really exciting. It feels like it's just getting started too. It's still, I think, has enormous potential.
So in terms of the response and the reaction and the action from these audiences, I mean, it seems like you've been very well received as a concept in terms of inviting the audience to be active participants in the creative process, whether that be inviting them to sing along with your band or inviting them to be a part of creating the opportunity for beauty to exist in places all over the globe. So from your reaction, you think audiences are hungry for this type of interaction and collaboration with artists?
I think that the great lesson, if you trace creativity and artistry back to its earliest forms, we've used music for all kinds of things. We use it to get through our days, like singing along while you're on a, like a hunt or but if you really kind of look at where it was used the most, it was used as a way of bringing people together at times of transition, right? So a rite of passage ceremony, a dirge at a funeral, like, there are different songs for different purposes, and a lot of music is connected to spiritual traditions and kind of the context for reflecting on those things that are greater than us. That idea that we are part of something like this beautiful symphony of life that we are surrounded by, and that we actually are a part of it. We aren't just here on it, like we are of it, in this relationship that we have to this larger symphony. Like we're a melody in this much larger music. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of thinking lends itself well to moments of reflection or transition. But artistry in that way has always been about trying to help add nuance and essence into a moment that seems like it's bigger than words, mm-hmm. right? That communication of something beyond words, or an invitation to a space that words have not yet been invited. And so if you look at that, it's almost an interesting evolution that we got to a place where something was meant to almost be passively observed, right? So we went through this phase of passive observation, kind of looking into art as someone on the outside, and I think that that's beautiful. Like so many amazing moments have existed in that way, but it almost seems like there's a coming full circle happening right now, where we do want to get our hands dirty and create. Like we all have a drive to participate and to create. And so as artistry as a whole is kind of lowering those barriers of entry, mm-hmm. To invite more people into the creative process, the kinds of experiences we're seeking are both the things that are going to elevate our perspective and show us something we haven't seen before, but invite us then in to participate and adopt that into our own creative process as well. Because ultimately, it's kind of like an inhale and an exhale, right? You inhale all of these ideas or concepts or sounds or like stories or images. We kind of process that and gestate, and then we release and we put back out into the world. And I think that the boundaries between those things are kind of blurry and dissolving in a way, but that's just kind of part of the evolution of how we both are inspired and then create in response to that inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.